Hello, and welcome to SharePoint Fundamentals with Learnit. My name is Christina Tedesco, and I will be your instructor for this course. If you're enjoying these videos, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions you want answered by one of our instructors, please join our offsite community. The link is in the description as well. As always, if this course has exercise files, you will find them in the video description below. Okay, so let's get started. So let's start off with a Microsoft SharePoint overview. So first and foremost, what is SharePoint? SharePoint is a website tool that was created by Microsoft for the main purposes of document management and collaboration. It's mostly used as an intranet content management system for organizations, but it can also be used as an external-facing website accessible from the internet. So let's talk a little bit about some SharePoint history. SharePoint actually goes all the way back to 2001 with an original on-prem version that created something called Classic Templates. So Classic Templates were great because they offered a variety of functionality, but they were really labor intensive and really bulky to maintain. So in 2013, Microsoft migrated to an online or cloud version to make the configuration and maintenance much easier. And they took that a few steps farther in a few years. And in 2019, they actually updated their templates with a more modern look and feel known today as modern sites. So what is a modern site? So a modern site is a template configuration, and there are three main templates in the modern sites setup. There's team sites, collaboration sites, and publishing sites. So a modern site is basically just a pre-configured template for a website that structures only the most relevant features that you need in that configuration. Now, that being said, SharePoint is a fully customizable tool, and you can add on to each one of those standard templates to make sure that your website has all the functionality it needs. All right, so what are we going to cover in this course? First off, we're going to talk about the SharePoint site structure. So SharePoint is not just a single-page website. There's actually a hierarchy from a site collection all the way down to subsites and assets. So we'll talk about how that's set up behind the scenes so that you understand exactly how the structure is put together. Then we'll talk about SharePoint apps. You can plug and play and add in applications into your website template that you select to make adding in features very easy, and we'll walk through how to work that process. We'll talk about site permissions. And SharePoint offers a variety of permissions for both content and sharing, and we'll talk about each of those setups and how to set them up in your site or site collection. We'll review navigation. So we'll talk about how to navigate through a SharePoint site and what to look for where, so that you can understand how to make sure you can see all of the information that's available in your website. We'll talk about site apps in the content area. So this is a little bit different than SharePoint apps, and it's a lower level of content that is embedded or plugged into a specific page, and it shows and allows for a different area of features, and there's different type of content that you can see in a specific page's content area as opposed to an actual application that's linked into the site itself. All right, so then we'll talk about following sites so that you can make sure that you receive notifications and alerts for content that's updated on sites that you have some interest in. We'll talk about lists and libraries. This is one of the main features of SharePoint. This is what it was really built for. It's built for maintaining lists and libraries. So we'll show you how to put that together, create a document library, create a list, and see how you can use SharePoint to organize and acquire the assets that you need for your departments and your organizations. We'll talk about integrating with Office 365. One thing that Microsoft does very well is talk to other Microsoft products. So we'll talk about how to access Microsoft applications within SharePoint and how to access SharePoint from other Microsoft applications. We'll review collaborating with SharePoint. SharePoint has a variety of collaboration features to enable discussions within the website itself. So we'll show you how to put those pieces together and enable collaboration on your sites to keep your communication active. We'll discuss version management. So this pertains to maintaining the integrity in your documentation. So as you add assets to your website, you're adding documents in your document library and you're updating lists. There is a way that you can see an audit trail on who made what change when, and we'll show you how to see that process so that you can make sure your content is always relevant and acquire the information you need of who made what change. We'll talk about customizing views. So anyone who has any experience with working in spreadsheets, tables, things like that, views are very important to make sure that the information that your users are seeing makes sense to them and is visually appealing and only shows the relevant content that they need. So we'll walk through that process. And then we'll talk about SharePoint pages. So there is a variety of things that you can do with a page. You can add content, you can change the UI, you can customize the features quite a few different ways. So we'll walk through all of the areas that you can customize in a SharePoint page and what each part pertains to and the type of information it holds. Okay, that's our course content in a nutshell. So let's get to it and let's get learning. Okay, so let's talk about the SharePoint site structure and hierarchy. So SharePoint at its highest level is actually a site collection. Okay, so if you work for a large organization and you log into their SharePoint site, you are more than likely starting at the very top, which is the collection of sites for your organization that houses a homepage. That's going to be your landing page, obviously. And then underneath there are going to be subsites, pages, and libraries. So let's talk through this, okay? So up top here at the very top, this is SharePoint Instance Office 365. And what this means is obviously to access SharePoint, you have to have a Microsoft subscription, there's licensing, and once you acquire your license with Microsoft, they set up an Office 365 instance for you, which is where they build your SharePoint site. So at the very top of your organization, you have the top intranet site that is the highest node in your site collection. Now, from that top level node, you're going to get into your subsites that are different areas of the organization. So in this example, we're using departments as subsites in this structure from the site collection. So here's my company site up here. Here's my finance department subsite here. And here's my operations department subsite over here. Okay, and depending on the permissions that you give your users that you allow to access your intranet site, they'll either be able to access the finance or the operations subsites. Now, as we keep going down through the hierarchy, we see the assets that are connected to each of the subsites. So in this example, finance has two pages. They have a page for accounts payable information, they have a page for accounts receivable information, and they have a library for all of their contracts. And the operations subsite has a page for their order management department. Okay? Now, the people who access their operations subsite have access to their order management pages. And the people who can access their finance subsite have access to their accounts payable, their accounts receivable, and their contracts library. Now, you may have some roles and some people who want to access both the finance and operations subsites. That's fine. When you set up your permissions, you make sure you make a group or a level to enable access to the specific subsites underneath from the site collection so that everybody has the rights that they need to access the subsites that pertain to them. Now, additionally, you can also take your permissions to the next level. Maybe you want some folks in your finance department to just access accounts payable, or just access accounts receivable, or just access one of these pages and the library. You can set that level of configurations in your permissions as well. All right, so I hope this gave you a good idea on how the structure works behind SharePoint. In this lesson, we covered what the structure is like under the covers or behind the pages, and you understand the basic navigation concept and hierarchy from a site collection all the way through to subsites, pages, and libraries. In our next lesson, we'll talk through how to access a site so that you can get into a SharePoint site and start looking into how to navigate around. Thanks very much for listening to this lesson. I'll meet you in the next one, and let's keep learning. Okay, so before we dive into SharePoint, let's make sure you have access to a site. Now, if you work for a company and your organization has a site that you can access, that's fantastic. Go ahead and use that. If you don't, we can actually install a sample site from Microsoft fairly quickly, and you can use this as your sample to follow along through in this course. So here's what you can do. Navigate to this site, and you'll find this link in the descriptions below, docsmicrosoft.com, SharePoint, add a sample site. And from this page, all you need to do is scroll down to the Get Started section, and then click on SharePoint Lookbook. And then from here, you're going to go into See Examples. And then on this page, select the Team option and look at these templates. We're mainly going to cover Team modern sites in this course. We're going to be using that template as our example. So I'm using this one. I downloaded this one over here. This is the template that I'm going to use. If you want, pick the same one. Click that template. In the next page, it's going to ask you to add it to your tenant. So like we talked about before in the introduction, if you're doing this, you need to have a Microsoft subscription, you need to have a license, and that will give you a tenant that they can build your instance from. So if you click on this button, you're going to get to another page. They're going to ask you to verify a few specifics about your account and your tenant. Say yes, and then they will create the site for you behind the scenes. The whole process takes about 5 minutes. You'll get an email when your site is complete. So if you're following through with this, go through those steps, wait for your email, pause this course, then come back and we'll dive in. Hey everyone, and welcome back to SharePoint Fundamentals. In this chapter, what we're going to learn is just basic navigation in a SharePoint site. Okay, so we're going to start at the highest level of site. What you're looking at right now is the Site Collections homepage for my SharePoint site collection. We'll start here. We'll talk about how to navigate around these global navigation options, and then we'll dive into getting deeper into the actual site itself. Okay, so it's fairly straightforward. Once you're at your landing page or your home page for your site collection, you're going to see the same basic navigation bar up top for all of your SharePoint sites. So let's just talk about this from left to right. Okay, so starting over here on the left, just like all Microsoft applications, you have your application launcher. Now, depending on the subscription that you have with Microsoft, you'll see the available applications that you have, and you can also get into more detail for the Office 365 applications from here. All right. You'll also see some of the latest documents that you've had accessed in the past. And if you click on more docs, that'll expand that list. Like all SharePoint sites and like all Microsoft sites, you have the global search bar in the center of the navigation. So if you click in here, enter your search options, you'll be able to find anything that you need within the collection that you have. Over here on the right-hand side, starting off in the far corner, you have your account profile details. So if you click in here, you'll see details about your account profile and additional navigation links where you can get into additional profile settings and make any updates if you have to. Next to that, you have your help icon, which brings you to support. And depending on your questions that you ask, it'll navigate you into specific areas. The little gear icon that's next to that is the settings. So if you go into that, you'll see some specific settings for your SharePoint collection and your SharePoint sites. We'll be diving into this much deeper in future chapters. And then over here, basically what you have is just some next steps or some ideas that SharePoint can give you to improve your site based on the standard template that you selected. Now over here on the left-hand side, you have your global navigation bar for SharePoint. The top icon over here is your home page. So when you click on this, you're going to automatically get to where we currently are for the home page that gives you a more detailed layout for your site collection. Okay, so you can see right when I clicked on that, I got into the layouts, and this shows me some high-level defaults that I have for navigating into my SharePoint collection. We'll talk through these in a second. The next icon down here is My Sites icon. So if you click in here, you'll get into some more details on the sites that you have access to. It'll show you in a list view what you frequent and then what you are currently following. We'll talk about following sites in a later chapter. Over here in My News, it's going to give you a list of news depending on the subscriptions or the access that you have to your site collection. It'll give you some specifics from those sites to give you some high-level news notifications. And then over here in My Files is access to your OneDrive. Okay, so everything's connected in Microsoft, like we said. It's all on the cloud. Your subscription is all integrated together. So here you have a list of some recent files that you've accessed from your OneDrive location. So it's another shortcut to get to some additional information in your site. Now over here in this default template, the way that this is set up, and this can also be customized, you have a different view of some of the same information that you have over here on the left. So here's the news from the sites that's also over here on the left-hand side. Here's the sites that you frequent. And then over here on the center left, a little bit to the right of the navigation bar, you have in here who you're following, what your recents are, and what your featured links are. So at a high level, it does give you just some different views of the same information, but the intent here is to have very easy access to all the information in your site collection. Okay? All right, so in this chapter, we covered basic navigations at a very high level. In the next chapter, we're going to dive in a little bit deeper. We're going to talk about something called a quick launch bar, which is more detailed navigation from the actual site itself when you dig in there. And then we'll explore on how to update that information and navigate in your specific SharePoint site. All right, so thanks for listening in this chapter, and I'll see you in the next one. Welcome back, everyone. Okay, so we've learned how to access a site and how to navigate around the top level site collection. Let's actually dig into the sites themselves a little bit more and learn how to navigate there. So I'm starting off in the same place where I was in the last chapter. I'm at my highest level landing page in my SharePoint collection. And what we're going to do is actually dig into some specific sites. So before we get into that, I want to just recap some details that we talked about in the summary section of this course, where modern sites in SharePoint are really mainly just different site template collections. And I'm going to show you an example of that here. Now, if you walk through the setup process with me and you created your own team site from the SharePoint examples, you're going to have a card here under frequent sites that says communications. Now, this is actually a really good example because if you remember in the summary chapter, what we talked about was modern sites have 3 different types of templates. They have team sites, communication sites, and publishing sites. And again, a template is just a predefined configuration of a site to kind of help you get started. Now, this team site that we created is actually titled Communications to make it even more clear, right? But this is actually a very good example because even though this team site is titled Communications, you click into it, obviously you get into the website, it is still a team site template. And what that just means is that there's different options that are predefined to allow you to navigate easily in your site. So in this default template, that's a team site titled Communications that Microsoft provided for us. Over here on the left-hand side, we have something called a quick launch bar, and we'll get into that in just a second. Over here in the center, you have your same default for communication news. So this gives you your current information that's in your site. Down here on the bottom, we have 2 other web parts. We'll talk about this in more detail in later chapters also, but at a high level, just so you know, your pages are broken out into actual parts where you can define the information that's shown in that panel, okay? So this part is document list here. This is actually your document library for this site. And then over here, we have the activity that's been happening in this site. So this gives you a list of the latest information on things that have been happening. So as you can see here, Christina Tedesco has accessed quite a bit of information in this site. Here's exactly what happened. Over here on the right-hand side, you have some more news. You have a resources panel over here. And then you have some specific team locations information on here to give you some logistics as to the members or the resources that are in your teams. If you scroll down, you have some more setups here to give you additional information. All of this information is fully customizable. All right. Now, because I'm the owner or I'm the admin of this, and we'll get into permissions in the next chapter, I see some options up here, right? So I can click in here really easily and I can do some things on my site. I can make a new page, I can discard my changes, I can get into some page details, and I can look at some analytics. We'll talk about that in later chapters as well. You also see over here on the right-hand side, some edit options. And if I'm in the middle of making some changes, which it appears to be on this page, I'll have the options to republish my changes to get the latest content online as soon as possible. Now, what I want to focus on here, though, is just this quick launch navigation bar over here on the left, because it looks different depending on the template that you chose, okay? So in this team site over here called Communications, I have this quick launch bar over here on the left that gives me really easy access to all the places in my website. This is my home page. I can click into my notebook. I can go into my team calendar. I can go into my documents. I can share, I can look at my Teams channel if I'm integrated with Teams, which I can be by default in Microsoft. I can go to OneNote. I have really quick, easy access to all the areas that are in this actual site. If I click on the edit button here, it also allows me to update this information fairly easily. So I can do a variety of things. I can move the list of links that are in here, so I can change this order. I can move documents up here if I like that better. I can move it under notebook. I can move it back to where I liked it if I don't like those changes. I can make this order be whatever I want it to be. And if you hover on here, you can see here very easily, you can add a link or label to the navigation. If I want to add something, I click on that. I type in my URL. I give it a display name, and boom, just like that, I have an additional link on my navigation. All right, and then there's that. So you have a few options here to customize this out of the box. You also have an additional option down here to enable site navigation for audience targeting. And this just gives some promotion or some more easy availability to site content to the specific audience that you have for your site, okay? So you're going to save that. That'll save all your changes. You see here your new link that's on here. So this is fairly easy and straightforward to update. Now, if I'm in a communication site, I have those same options, it just looks different. So I also have a communication site, and again, this is not the team site template, this is a communications template, and you can see right off the bat how different this looks, right? I have different options over here. Actually, I have the same options, they just look different, and they're in a different order. So I have my published and my edit links over here on the right-hand side. These are the same links that are in the team site, they just look a little bit different, and they're in a different place. If I scroll down here, I have different default settings to these web parts in my communication site, okay? So I have some event information over here in this panel. I do still have a documents library list over here in that panel. If I go down here, my news is all the way down here, right? This is different. In the team site, it was all the way up here, so it's set up differently, as you can see. I have over here some host information, and if I scroll down, you can see that there's different web parts that were set up in these areas for this page. And that's really basically the difference between communication sites and team sites. It's how it's set up and the accessibility. Now, also you're going to see here too, this is your quick launch bar, okay? So this is a lot more condensed than what we had in the team site. The team site had a lot more of internal defaults that you can get to very easy. And what I want to do is I want to open up this in another tab so that I can show you fairly quickly back and forth what the differences are, because I think that's going to be useful. So in here in my communication site, I only have these 3 default settings for my quick launch bar, and this is my quick launch bar. So if I go in here and I edit, I have the same options here that I have in my team site. I can still make all these changes, and the edit panel will still come up over here on the left-hand side, so you can see all that. But when you're done, the actual bar itself sits up here on top, and you can see there's only a few options here as opposed to the team site that had all of these options here, because the team site is built for more internal collaboration, right? So I have a team that's set up in a lot of different areas outside of SharePoint, and the idea with SharePoint is to make it easy to access all of that information that the entire team has. So I can get to the calendar, I can get to the notebook, I can get to the team documents. Where over here was just a communication site, there's not as much internal interaction that I'm really requesting off the bat. I'm just sharing information. That's the idea of the communication site. So that's just why your links up here are more condensed. They're basic. Again, if you dig in there, you can see that there's more additional detail down here, but they're not as internally interactive set in that direction as it is on the actual team sites themselves. All right. So I hope that makes sense. This gives you a good idea on the differences between at least 2 of the modern site templates that SharePoint offers, the communication site and the team site, and the intention behind those templates. Now, just like the team site, this This is fully customizable. We can make this look and feel however we want to. It's just set up differently depending on the target audience that your intent is when you build that site. Okay, so we covered a lot in this chapter. We covered at a high level what this quick launch bar does, how it looks in between these two different templates. What I want to get into next is some permissions and user roles and share with you some specifics on depending on the role that you select for the users that you pick to access your site, what kind of information they'll be able to see, and how deep they'll be able to get into that information in your site. So thank you very much for listening to this chapter, and I will meet you in the next one. Welcome back, everyone. All right, let's start talking about site permissions and permission levels and the type of access that you can give to your audience. So I'm in my communication site here, and you'll see over here on the upper right-hand side, you have the setting icons we talked about earlier. If you click in there, you're going to see where you can set your site permissions. So if you go in there, just click on Site Permissions, you're going to see the options that you have. Now, what we're going to cover here are two different areas. First area we're going to talk about is the type of access or the level of access you can give your members that you add onto this site. And then we'll also look into sharing, and we'll see how you can let your members share the information on your site and who can do that. So let's talk about individual member access first. So you have 3 levels out of the box. You have site owners that have full control, and that's going to be your site administration, your site administrator, or the person who actually created the site, okay? You have your site members who have limited control, so you can allow them to come in the site and make some changes in the site, but you can't give them, or they don't have some of the additional administrative functions that the site requires. Only the person who has full control has those. Or you have site visitors who have no control. Now, basically, that means these people can just come in and they can read your information, but they can't make any changes to it, okay? So let's add a user to this site, okay? So I have the administrator all set up, and I want to add a member actually to my site. So if I click on the Share Site link there, I can type in who I want to access. So I have my first user here that I want to access, Chris Tito. I want to let this person have access to my site. Now, a little more behind the scenes here. Your users that have the ability to access your site have to be set up in Microsoft's Office 365 Admin Center. It's all connected through something called Active Directory. That's beyond the scope of this class. But the point to that is that in order for you to let a member access your intranet, they have to be a member of your organization. So they will need to be set up in another area before you can get them access to your SharePoint site. If you're not familiar with Office 365 administration or Active Directory, contact your IT admin for your organization, and they'll be able to fill those prerequisites for you for your users so that you can add them into the site. If you tried to add someone in who wasn't part of that organization or part of that list already set up, you would get an error message telling you needed to do some additional administration before you can give them access. Okay, but anyway, moving on. So this person, Chris Tito, I know she has access to my organization. She's a member here. I'm going to let her read this information. Optionally, you can send an email. You can click this or unclick this, and you can say, please access my site. Whatever you would like to hear, give them a notification that they're going to be able to get into your site. Gives you the site name up here, and then gives you the domain that this is connected to. So I'm going to say add. Now you can see here right by default, it says read. Now I could change this here, but I'm going to change the next screen to show you how it changes groups when you alter the access. But you have 3 default options. You have read, you have edit, and you have full control, depending on the level of access you want to give them. All right, so let's just add this person here. That looks cool. So I said read. So that means they come in here into the visitors category because the visitors are the folks who just read information and don't edit it. Now, if I wanted to change Chris, all right, you know what? Chris is a member of my department. That's right. I want to let her actually alter some content on this site. Right in here, you can change this to the next level, which would be edit. When you do that, you see what happens here. Chris comes out of the visitors group and she goes into the members group because now she has a higher level of access. So the group that access pertains to will follow and change as you make the changes to this user. All right. So again, if, Chris, all right, you know what, she's going to get bumped up to full control. I want to let this person edit the site and be an owner also. I can make that change. And then this user would go into the site owners group to show the level of access they have at the group level. Now, what you can also do is control or change how members can share information. So there's accessing information and there's sharing information, okay? And basically what this means is you can specifically define who can share the site or information in the site, okay? So this configuration that I have just says only site owners can share files, folders, and the site, okay? So I'm only allowing the people who are in the site owners group to be able to share anything in the site or the site itself. Now I can change this. If I want to expand the access, I have one or two other options. I can say site owners and members can share files, folders, and the site. People with edit permissions can share files and folders. So in this example you saw, anyone with edit goes into our members group. But if you get farther into permissions, you can set some users with edit settings and not have them be in the member group and still enable them access to share information in your site. So the permissions allows you to get farther along than the defaults that you see at the first level. And then the next option that you have is site owners and members and people with edit permissions can share files and folders, but only the site owners can share the site. So you can see as you go up, it expands the level of sharing depending on the groups you want to allow the level of access to. So you have quite a few options here. Additionally, you can also confirm that you're going to allow access requests. So that means you'll allow people who want to get into your site but may not currently have access, send a request to say, hey, please give me access. And then from there, you can identify who you want to get that notification. It can either be your communication site owners or your specific email that you set for anyone who may not be in that group. All right. And then you can also enter a default custom message for those people who are going to receive that notification to see, to let them know what they have to do and give this person access to that site. Now, farther along, and this would be in a more advanced course, you can get into some advanced permission settings. And I'm just going to show you this at a high level to give you an idea on the additional options that you have. So in addition to the default groups that you have here, the members, owners, and the visitors that we saw on the settings access page over there on the right-hand side, you also have the ability to get into more specific permission levels. And as you get more comfortable with your site and you create your own custom groups, you'll see in here the different levels of editing that you can give to the people who are currently defaulted in your member group. So you can give them a different group other than member. You can give them just some design, edit, contribute, or read specific information in that group. Okay, so this just shows some additional options that you have to get into permissions as you start to customize your site and it grows in its ability and information that you want to share and allow it to be updated. So there's a variety of options that you have here that are beyond just the defaults. Okay, in this chapter, we covered permissions. All right, we went into settings. We talked about how to create and set up new users. We talked about the basic level of groups that are in those setups and how to change the members in those groups and exactly what the options are going to be for those. In our next lesson, we'll talk about SharePoint applications, so you can see at its highest level some of the options that you have to add content to your site. So thank you very much for listening to this chapter, and I will see you in the next. Hey everyone, welcome back. All right, let's talk about applications, SharePoint applications, how to access them, and then we'll cover how to add application parts into your content areas of your website. Okay. All right. So here I am in our team site, our communications team site. I'm on my homepage and let's take a look on how to access SharePoint applications or Microsoft applications to expand the functionality of your website. So you're going to go over here on the right-hand side into your settings icon. You're going to click on that and you're going to go into add an app. Okay. So you may see something different here depending on how your organization is currently set up for the applications they've already enabled for you to access. So here by default, since this is a new site and on my little organization, I haven't added any apps specifically that I can just let users access from this start page. You may have some here. If you can, that's great. You can click on them and then you'll see the navigation options on how to access them to your site. If you don't, you have a couple of other options to find information. So here's some subcategories here. Number one, again, this is from your organization. So if you had anything here that your organization currently enabled, you would see that. Or you can go into the SharePoint store. Now, before we get into the SharePoint store, I do want to cover some out-of-the-box applications that SharePoint already has enabled that are accessible through the Classic experience. Now, if you remember in the introduction section, we talked about modern templates versus the Classic templates that first came out. What SharePoint does is, even though it's migrated to a new look and feel with the modern sites, it still allows backwards compatibility to the applications that were available in the Classic experience when they displayed that additional functionality. So basically what that means is you can still click in here and you'll see the Classic experience, which looks a little bit different. Okay, you can see there's some more information here and you have a different kind of look and feel over here to the navigation options over on the left-hand side. But what you can see is all of the default applications that SharePoint has that you can just access and link into your current modern website. Okay, so let's look at this. It's fairly straightforward. There's library and list information. You can see tasks. You can add in a mailbox if you want to. There's some wiki page defaults here that they have, contacts, tasks. So just some basic information here that you can add into your site. So what you can do here very easily is pick one of these out of the box. Let's just say you wanted to access a calendar application. So you click on that and you're going to have to give it a name. Let's call this one just the CT team calendar. And I'm going to click create. And what this did is it created this application right into my current site. Now, what it defaults you to is the content page listing of all the assets that are currently in your site. And you can see here the calendar application that was added to it. Okay, so now you might be wondering, well, how do I know where to find this new application part in my site? What you'd want to do here is add this to your quick launch bar over here on the left to give your members and your audience easy access to this new calendar. Now, this team calendar is different than the default one that we had over here that came out of the box. This is one that's more specific from the application list that I just chose. So to add that to my quick launch bar, I'm just going to copy my URL here. I'm going to go home and I'm going to click edit. And I'm going to add my link right here on the bottom. And I'm going to say CT team calendar. And I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to save. And now I have access to my new web part right there, which brings me into the content list for where I can access the calendar. OK, if you want to get even more granular, you can add the specific URL to the calendar. Go back to your home page here. Actually, let's do that. I should have done that initially, actually. Let's edit this. I'm going to go into my CT calendar link. And I'm going to make it go here instead of to the site contents page. And then let's click on that. There you go. That is much better. Okay. So now I have access to this calendar. Okay. So you can see very easily how to get into a application that's already set up through Microsoft and SharePoint to add in some functionality fairly easy into your website. Now, if you don't like any of those in the Classic experience, because this isn't really anything that you need, that you have on there, and you don't have any other options that are set up here by your organization, you can go shopping in the Microsoft Store, okay? So if you click on Find More Apps here in the SharePoint Store, you're going to get here a very wide variety of applications that are already set up to be configured into SharePoint. These may have been created by Microsoft, they may be another third-party vendor who put these together, but point being, if these are in the store, then they're already set up to be able to work with SharePoint. So you can navigate through here. There's a lot of information, as you can see. On the left-hand side, you can pick a category if you want to cut down this list a little bit to see if there's anything that's useful to you. If you see something that you like, let's click on it. And then you go in there. It gives you some more detailed information. Some of these have a video that'll walk you through the application, tell you what it's about. If you want this application, you're going to make a request. You're going to make a request to the vendor and then get authorization through your SharePoint administrator if that's not you, and be able to add that application to your SharePoint site once you get the confirmation from there. All right. So there's a few options that you can to access information. There's obviously a very wide variety that's already out of the box and available with SharePoint, both internally for some specific intranet information, calendars, lists, email boxes, things like that, and then externally with other applications from the SharePoint store. Okay, so hopefully this gives you a really good idea on what's available for you to expand the functionality of your website. There's a lot of out-of-the-box functionality that's already created. That's what makes SharePoint very easy to use. There's not a lot of customization or coding or development that you have to do to really get this to be a very high-level functioning dynamic website. Okay, so we talked about SharePoint applications. We learned how to find them add an app, both what's already currently available from your organization, from default in SharePoint via the classic experience, or going shopping in the SharePoint store. What I want to show you next is how to add an application through the site content area of a page. So there's another level of detail for content that we can add in. We'll look at that next and keep developing our site. So I'll see you in the next chapter. Welcome back. Okay, so back into our team communication site. In addition to applications from the SharePoint store and from your organization, you can also add specific information to the content area on your web pages. So we're going to add something to our home page here, okay? So since I'm the administrator of the site, I'm the site owner, I have all these options over here where I can see an option to add in new information here from the drop-down. I can see additional page details, and I can look at some analytics. What I want to do is add in a new web part to bring in some more content onto this home page. So to do that, I'm going to go over here on the right-hand side, and I'm going to click Edit. So you can see my page change when I do that, and I have a couple of new options now that I can work through. So first of all, you see some boxes come around the content areas that are currently in here on your home page. And what these are called containers. And what these containers can do, or sections, is identify specific information that you want on this part of your page. So let's just talk through the sections on this page so you get an idea on how it's set up. So this section has communication news put in it. That gives me the list that's shown in here for this part. Over here on the right-hand side is a different section that connects to different information, more specific than what's in the list applet in the center. On the right-hand side, I have a resources part that shows a list of links that's over here to access additional information for my organization. And then down here on the bottom, this section is a documents list, and this section is an activity list. So if you click on it, you can see the container frame or the section frame that you set up when you create a section or a column in your web part. And then what you do is you pick the type of content that you want in that section. All right, so let's do that. Let's make a new web part. Let's put in some content, and let me show you how that works. So let's go right over here to the left-hand side. And if you hover over any plus sign, that's the area where you're going to be adding a new section in. So let me click on that. So once I click on that, I have a couple of options for my section layout. I can do 1 column, 2 column, 3 columns. and I can vary the width of those information either left or right or make it vertical. So I just want this to be one column, right? Let's just keep it simple, okay? So that one column fills up the entire area of this container. And now what I want to do is add some information into this section. So I click the plus sign in the center, and it tells me that I'm going to be adding in a new web part into this column. And this is where I pick the type of application type information to put in this web part. And you have this broken out into a few different groups. You have what's frequently used up here. So this kind of tells you what's most popular to use in these web parts. It has some text, media, and content section information below that. Then you have some document list and library content. There are some feeds, some people events, data analytics, regional information, and then some advanced information down here. Okay, so as you can see, this is different type of information than the actual applications that are from SharePoint. It's more detailed, it's more granular, and it's designed to be more specific. So let's keep it simple. Let's just say here, I want to add in some weather information because it's important for my resources here to know what the weather is in the specific locations. Let's just say the resources who travel, okay? So all you do here is click on that. It fills in the content area. You can add in some locations. And let's put another one in here. Yeah, one more here. Okay, and then boom, just like that, I have content. I can make this a title. We'll call this office locations. Let's say these are where my offices is. And there it is right there. It's really as simple as that. I click out of it and it's saved. If I want to change this, if you just click on the bar or the border of the application that you added in here, you can see some options. You can edit this web part, you can change it, you can move it, you can duplicate it, or you can delete it. All those options are on the left-hand side, okay? So that's in there. I like that. That looks really great. Okay, so always remember, after you make a change to your page, you're going to either save it as a draft, which means if you save it, you can access it and make additional updates if you want to, but no one else can. If you want the rest of your audience to be able to see your changes, you're going to click republish. Okay, so let's do that. I click republish, it goes online. Okay, excellent. I get that notification, it's done. Here I am on my home page. Here's my new home page. Let's check it out. Everything is the same up there. Yeah, that makes sense. I didn't change anything there. But here in the middle, when I scroll down, here's the new web part that I put in here for weather to show my office locations. Okay? All right, so it's really that easy. It is super simple to add information, customize in here what you have with out-of-the-box functionality that SharePoint offers. Next, we'll talk about following sites. So in addition to being able to access sites and see information, you can follow sites. So you can make sure you get notifications of the latest information and keep in the loop when changes happen to other information that you want to be privy to. So thank you for listening to this chapter, and I'll meet you in the next. Hey everyone. Okay, let's quickly cover how to follow a site. It's very easy. If you're on your home page for your site collection, you see right off the bat over here on the left-hand side who you are currently following. If you want to add a site to that list, all you need to do is find the site that you want to access. Most likely it will be here in recent if it's a site that you frequently access. And you're going to see over on the right-hand side the option to see if you're following it or not. Just click that button. It says not following by default if you haven't enabled that yet. Click it. It'll identify that you're following. Then when you go home to your landing page, when you first get in to SharePoint, you will see now that that site has been added to your following list. And it becomes easily accessible where you can see right away any information or content that may have been updated to that site. Welcome back, everyone. All right, let's talk about libraries. So what is a library? A library is basically a location on a site where you can upload, create, update, and collaborate on files with team members. It'll show you the file name, who created it, when it was created, things like that along those lines. Now, Microsoft has created some templates to kind of categorize or restrict the types of files that can go in a library. So by default, they have this list of templates created. They have a document library, asset library, picture library, report library, slide library, wiki page, data connection, and form library. Okay, so there's a large list of restrictions and templates that are out of the box by Microsoft that you can have in your SharePoint site. Now, for modern sites, a document library is enabled by default, okay? And we're going to look at those. And you'll see the variety of options that you have with a document library where you can add in any kind of file type that you want and really just use this one library type to enable all the type of content that you want to upload to your site. So what you can see here in this site are some libraries that are already pre-created. So I have a few things going on here. I have 4 document libraries and I have 1 page library. This will be created for you by default in SharePoint as you add site pages to your existing site. So if you click in here, you'll see all of the pages that you have created for this site, and they're housed in the page library by default. Now, these document libraries that you see here can hold a variety of information. Now, the intent for this structure is to organize the types of files that are in each one of these libraries. So for the documents library, I'd really only want to see things in there like Excel documents, Word documents, things like that along those lines. And you can see in here the default view. I have the name of the file, when it was modified, and who modified it. You can add columns in here and customize this view. We'll be looking at that in later chapters. For the form templates, I would be expecting to see in here just Microsoft Forms or whatever my form tool is to list in here the forms that are used for this website. I don't have any created yet, but if I did create some, that's where I would house them. For the site assets, I'd expect to see in here some media type related files, JPEG files, PNG files. I have a notebook here that probably holds organizational information in here for the site to kind of give some details on how it's put together. For the style library, I'd expect to see things in here like metadata files. And that means things like CSS files or HTML files that were used to actually configure the style or the look and feel for this website. So as you can see, the naming convention for these libraries is a way that you can just use a document library to organize the information as opposed to a specific predefined template that Microsoft has. Now, that being said, if you'd like to learn more or know more about those templates, your site administrator or your IT administrator can enable them for you. They do offer some additional functionality beyond just looking at documents that may be useful for you to make sure that not only you're organizing your content the right way, but you're enabling those advanced features as well. But the use of a document library really gets you 90% of the time where you need to be. And you can see here with your upper menu item options that we'll go through in further chapters, what you can do here in this library. So off the bat, you can say new and you can add in here any type of these documents here in this default document library. And if you click upload and select files, you'll see that you're allowed to choose any kind of file type at all. So it's not just restricted to a Word document or an Excel file. You're really able to add in whatever you would like. Okay. All right. So I hope this was useful in covering high level what a library is in SharePoint, cover some basic differences between the document libraries and the site pages library that's by default going to be in your modern site with SharePoint. And we also did cover some of the earlier template versions that Microsoft had created for you to already pre-configure some restrictions on the type of files that can add it to a library and have some additional feature items in there as well to allow some updates to those specific file types. Okay, so in the next lesson, we'll actually create a document library, put a document in there, open it, edit, and look at all the things that you can actually do in the document library. So thanks very much for listening to this lesson, and I'll see you in the next chapter. Okay, so let's create a library, all right? So let's go into our team site, our communications team site, and let's create a new library for us to use. So the easiest way to get here, or the best way to get here, is to go into the site contents section. So over on the right-hand side, click on the gear icon up there for settings, and then in there, you'll see the option to navigate to site contents. So go in here, let's see what we have going on here. Okay, so look, this looks really almost the same as the other site contents library that we were looking at in the previous video to talk about document libraries and other types of libraries that SharePoint has. So you can see in here by default, you have those same type of categories already set up for you. The documents, the form templates, the site assets, the styles. We created this team calendar when we worked in applications, remember that? And you have your site pages here that shows the current pages that are available for this site, okay? Okay, great. So this is fantastic. We're starting off in a really good spot here. So let's create ourselves a new document library to hold additional information. Okay, so I'm going to get back to my site contents page. And up here on the top, you're going to see a new option. Just click on that and you can see a few things that you're allowed to do here. You can create a list, a page. We'll cover these in later chapters. The document library that we're going to do now. Here's also another link to apps that we covered earlier. And here's where you'll begin to create some of your subsites also. So let's click on document library. So super simple. All we have to do is give it a name and then we can optionally give it a description. So let's call this sales contracts. Okay, so I'm going to start to upload in here all the contracts that I have for my salesmen, who they're selling to, what they're selling, things like that. So I'm going to call this contracts for sales. Let's just keep this simple. All right, I'm going to create this guy. Okay, so once I create it, I'm in my library. And I can see here by default, the view that I have set is going to show the name of the file, when it was modified, and who modified it. Okay, so once we're in here, we have a couple of options. We can upload a file or we can create a new file. We're going to do both in this lesson. So first, let's start with uploading a file. So I want to upload one of my existing sales contracts, and let's pretend we are a car sales dealership and we sold a car. So I'm going to search for my file. And you can see I can get to any file type that I want. In this course content, I have my bill of sale vehicle document here that I just created from a Microsoft Word template. I'm just going to click in here to add it to my library. Boom, there it is. Super simple. Couple of options coming out of the box. You can notify your team. If you click on this, you'll be able to send out a notification to your team that a new file was created in this library. And by default, you can see here, here's the file, here's when it was created, and here's who created it, okay? So if you click in here, through SharePoint, you're going to see your file and be able to access it right from the site itself, all right? And you have all of the options here that you can do in Word to modify it, share it, or do whatever you need to do. We'll cover this in future chapters as well. Right now, though, you can see how easy it is to just upload and share a file in a document library. Now, likewise, what you can do is you can create a new file from this library. So let's say, in addition to this bill of sale Word document that I want here, I also want some more information that's not in there. So let's create something. So in the new dropdown, I see any one of these out-of-the-box options that I have to select from. I want to make an Excel workbook to house some salesman-specific information. So in addition to who bought the car and who sold the car, I want some more information in here. So I want the salesman's first name, and I want their last name. And I want their email. And I want their phone number. Okay. All right. So that's done. It's automatically saved. I want to rename it though. I'm going to call this salesman list. Okay. I like that much better. I think that's good enough for now. So I'm going to close this. And I can see here right away, here's my document. Here's my new Excel sheet that I just created. Again, I can have a few options out of the box. Either in the document, I can share it here as well, or when I create it, I'll see a share option also. You can also just click on the little icon that comes in and send this to anyone that you want to notify that there's a new document in your library for, when it was modified, and who modified it. Okay? Okay, so at a high level, we created a new document library. We uploaded a file to this document library, and we created a file from this document library. So why don't you try this on your own, okay? Go through these steps, create a library. You'll find this motor vehicle bill of sales document in the description bar here for this course, where you can download it and add it to your library, or pick your own file and create your new salesman list from the Excel option in the new dropdown. All right. So try those things, then come back here and we'll get into the next lesson. Okay. So now that we learned how to create a library and upload documents, let's actually go a little farther than the last lesson and edit information from a document from the library and create a folder structure to help organize this information a little bit better. So you have your list of documents in here, and as your information grows, you're going to find the need to really keep it organized. So what you can also do here, in addition to creating documents, is creating folders to help organize that content. So let's say, for example, we want to organize our salesman information by location. I'm going to create a folder for each one of my locations. And let's say this one can just be US East. And we'll have US West. And let's say those are only 2 locations. So now I have some additional navigational options. Now, also in here, in this library, you'll see as you hover over your items, a few additional icons become visible to show you what you can do with those files. So let's talk through those very quickly first before we move some of this content. If you click on this, you can see up here the specific things that you can do with this file, okay? So you can open it, you can share it, you can copy the link, download the link, pin the top, or rename it. We looked at this icon in the last lesson. It's really specifically for sharing the file with other people to allow them to see what you've created on here. If you click on the 3 ellipsis button over here on the right hand side, you can see a submenu that show you a full list of everything that you can do here. So open, preview, share, copy link. This is all fairly straightforward. You can move it, which is what we're going to do. You can copy it. You can look at some version history. We'll talk about that in a later lesson. You can make sure you flag this as an alert so that you can be notified when anybody makes any changes. There's some more options over here for some more advanced configuration with workflow and notifications for automation. And then you can click in here and get the actual details to the site. Kind of gives you a high-level preview, who created it and when it was created, okay? So you can see a lot of information here that's right at your fingertips. So what I want to do is I want to move this file to my US East location because I know that that's where this file or this salesman resides who sold this car. But let's hang on a second before we do that, all right? So we want to make sure that we identify specifically in the file name the reason why it should be in the US East location to have it make sense for where we're putting it. So let's just actually edit this file right through SharePoint. So even though I uploaded it outside of SharePoint, I can edit the information in here now that it's in this SharePoint location through SharePoint itself. So very easily, I'm going to click in there, and here's my default information. I want to make changes to this. So I want to add in the location to my title so that I can identify where this was sold from. And I'm going to also make sure that that is in the file name as well. All right, I like that. That looks good. All right, this makes more sense to me. It's all done. That's all I had to do. It's automatically saved. If I wanted to change any additional information in here, you can click in here and you can make whatever changes you want. Let's just say I didn't want to make changes to this line over here. You can just simply highlight it, get rid of the information. Everything is saved automatically, so you can edit your information directly through SharePoint. You don't have to download a copy, make your changes, and then re-upload it, okay? All right, so I like these changes. These made sense to me. I'm going to close this document here, and I can see here as I refresh in this view, I now have the new name that's showing, and I'm going to move it into my US East folder. So I'm going to click on my 3 buttons. I'm going to say move to, and I have quite a list of options here over on the right hand side for everything that I have access to. I want to stay in my current library, and I want to go in the US East folder, and I'm going to say move here. There it goes. Super simple. It's now in my East folder, and I've changed the location, I've updated the name, and I've also gone in there and edited some additional content in this file. Okay, so why don't you guys try this on your own, okay? So go into the library that you just created, create yourself 2 new folders or 1 new folders, pick a file, open up your file, make some easy edits. I can do it right here to the salesman list. Let's just say I want to actually add a salesman. Super simple. Add in your specific information here. It's saved automatically. This looks good. Close it. Open it up. There it is. I'm good to go. All right. So you guys go ahead, make these changes, make your folders, edit your files, come back in here, and we will start with the next lesson. In the next lesson, we're going to cover in more detail how SharePoint integrates with these Microsoft Office programs so you get a better idea and a more comprehensive view on all the Microsoft programs that you can access with SharePoint. Hey everyone, welcome back. Okay, in this chapter, we're going to talk about versioning in SharePoint. So you have this intranet site and it's holding a lot of information for your organization, right? You've got documents, you've got lists, and you've got a lot of people accessing these assets. So it's fairly common for you to go into a document library that you've created a couple of weeks after you uploaded a document, and you open up the document and it's different. It's like, whoa, what happened here? Well, the good news is there's a way you can find out. SharePoint has something called versioning. And by default, with SharePoint Online, it's enabled for documents and list libraries, and it allows you to look at the audit history of the asset and figure out who changed what when. That's basically what you need to know. So what I'm showing you here is something from Microsoft documentation. Microsoft has a lot of really good documentation out there. It's really very good at giving you the basic level information or the first level of information for whatever it is that you're looking for. So I encourage everyone to use Microsoft documentation. I'll post this link down in the description section for this chapter so you can access it and look through this on your own. But basically, just go to docsmicrosoft.com. Search for SharePoint versioning, and you'll land in the section that you need more or less fairly quickly to see what you need to know. So I'm sharing this with you because they actually do a really good job here in summarizing what versioning is all about, okay? So right up top here in the basic idea, in a nutshell, this is what it is. Versioning creates a historical record of all changes with a date, time, and indication of the user who made the change. That's really all that you need to know, okay? Now, you are going to be able to link into and click into prior versions of a document, and you can even restore to that version. We'll talk through those steps in later chapters. Right now, what we want to do is we want to make sure we have versioning enabled for our lists and our libraries, and we want to go into our assets and see what version that they're in, okay? So that's what we're going to talk about now. Tells you here also the end user can view, delete, and restore the version if they want to, but you need to make sure you have the correct permissions, okay? So that's something you want to make sure also. So if you're trying to find the version of a document or a list and you can't see where it is, in the dropdown, it could just be your permissions. If that's the case, go to your IT admin, have them either adjust your permissions or get the information for you if it's in a site that you only have a certain amount of information you're able to see on, okay? But basically, to do this, here's what you need. There's a few things you can do. You can view a version, you can restore a previous version, you can delete a version, you can unpublish a version, or you can recover a deleted version, all right? And we'll talk about recovering deleted documents and lists in another chapter as well. But what you do need to make sure that you have, regardless of what you want to do, is the right permission level. So if you want to view the version history, you have to make sure you have full control, contribute, and read. If you want to restore a previous version, you want to make sure you have full control and contribute. If you want to delete a version, you have to have full control and contribute. And if you want to unpublish a version, you want to have full control and contribute. Now, to recover a deleted version, you need full control and or contribute. Okay, so that one's an either or. The document also here walks through, which we're going to do in this chapter, how to enable versioning, making sure it's enabled for your assets, and then it tells you how to access previous versions and see prior information. Gives you some defaults, talks about major versus minor versions. You have the option to turn on or off minor versions. Major versions will always be enabled, and that's just the whole number. If you want to save drafts or other like earlier sections of versions, to say it that way, you can enable minor versions. That'll give you a little bit more detail in your audit trail. It also gives you here some best practices to think about some things that you want to manage while you have versioning on to make sure it doesn't get too cumbersome, really just get to be too much to navigate through. All right, so I encourage everyone to look here. Let's look at our site now, and let's look at versioning in the sites that we have and see where we're at with the documents in our library. So I'm just going to start from the beginning here and go to our communications team site that we worked on in earlier chapters. And I'm going to go over to our sales contracts library that we created earlier. Now, first things first, really what we want to do is make sure versioning is enabled. So let's actually start there. So I'm going to go up here to the right-hand gear setting where I have my settings, and I'm going to go into site contents. And this is going to show me all of my lists and libraries that I have in this site. And I do see my sales contracts library here. Okay, so perfect. I know what I have. Now I want to see if I have versioning enabled on here. On every list and library, you'll see if you hover over it, these three ellipses, that's your action buttons. And if you click on that, you're going to go right into settings. This is going to give you either your list or library settings. So you click on that, and here you have all the settings for this document library. And there's a lot of things we can do here, right? We're concentrating on versioning right now, but you can see here you have a lot of options, a lot of ways you can really customize this information. As you get more familiar with the SharePoint, you'll definitely be going into some of those additional links as well. But let's stick to where we are today. So let's go into version settings. And let's see what's going on here, okay? Now you have a lot of options. First things first, it's going to ask you if you want to enable content approval. We'll be talking about content approval in later chapters, but by default, it's going to be set to no. Your second option is to make sure that you have document version history enabled, and it's going to ask you if you want major or minor versions. Now, this is what they were talking about in the documentation. If you want just major versions, anytime a change is made, it's going to just change it as numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, etc. If you want to hold on to minor versions, like draft versions, while people are making changes, it's going to enable minor versions so that you can see those iterations in the updates as well. Most of the time, people just use major versions. That suffices. But if you do have many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, or many hands in documents, minor versions might be something you might want to look into to make sure you save all of the audit information if it is particularly sensitive information. It also allows you to set the number of major versions you want to save up to. Okay, so 500, that's a lot. Okay, so you might want to take that number down, or if you want to make sure it's a little bit higher, you can change it to a little bit higher also. And then it also gives you an option to keep drafts for the following number of major versions as well. All right, going down here into draft item security, you can set options here. And again, you have to have the right permissions for this on who should see a draft items in the document library. So you can say any user, only users who can edit items, or only users who can approve items. And then you have an option here to enable check-in or check-out. We'll be talking about check-in and check-out in another chapter also. But here's where you want to make that a requirement if the document can be edited or not. Okay? All right, so this is set up the way I want it. I don't have to do anything here. This is great. I'm good to go. So I'm just going to click cancel. And I'm going to go back to my library that I want to work on. And I'm going to see what version I'm on for some of the things that we created in our earlier chapters. So let's just focus on the salesman list right here, okay? So here's my 3 buttons. So now the 3 buttons, I'm actually in the list. I'm in the library now. So I'm going to have different options here now that I'm in the library. The show actions are going to be more detailed now that I'm in the library, as opposed to when I was in site settings from site contents. And the options that I had here, you can see if I click on this, are delete settings and details. Once I'm actually in the library, my options change. I have a lot more in my list, okay? So what I want to do here is I want to see the versions of Salesman List. So I'm going to go right down here to version history. I'm going to click on that. And look at this. Here's what we got. Remember all those changes that we made earlier? Well, here's where they all are, and here's where they're all saved. If you click on these, you'll actually get into the document, and you will be able to restore an earlier version if you want to. We'll work through that in further chapters. Right now, we just want to make sure we know that we have versioning enabled for our library or our list, and to see what version of document we have in our latest document library. Okay? All right. So that was great. I think we covered a lot on here. We talked about versioning. We learned how to go into site settings through site contents and confirm that versioning is enabled for our site. We learned how to log into one of our lists or our libraries and find out exactly what version it is that you're on. So thank you very much for joining me in this chapter. Join me in the next one and we'll keep learning. Hey everyone. Okay, in this chapter, we're going to talk about checking in and checking out documents. Now, we referenced this a little bit in our last chapter, and what checking out a document means is it really locks the document so that if you're making edits in it, no one else can, and everyone else just has read access to that file in that library, which is really helpful when you're trying to make some major updates to a document, since SharePoint lets everyone see all the information simultaneously real time. If you're making some changes to that information, it helps if you're able to lock everyone else out, make sure you can make the changes that you need on your own without anyone else trying to do the same thing at the same time, so that the version that you need to get updated gets updated, and then if anyone else has to make any changes, they're doing it from the latest version. Okay, so let's walk and talk through how that process happens and what happens when you're the person who's actually checking out the document and editing it, and someone else goes in and tries to access that same file. Okay? All right, so I'm in my sales contracts library here, and let's just work on this salesman list that we created the other day. And I want to make some changes to this document. I want to add some salesmen in here. I don't want anyone else to do anything while I'm doing that. So I'm going to go into my actions button, these same 3 buttons that we were in before to look at versioning. I'm going to go down here towards the bottom, and I'm going to hover over the more option. This gives you additional options than what's shown in the first list. And on the very bottom here, you're going to see something called checkout. Okay, so I'm going to click on that. Now, when I do that, I get a little notice up here that says I have checked out one item and what I've checked out. And you're going to see here also this little red icon comes into play right before the action button over here. And if you hover over it, you see some basic information. And it says right here, you've checked out this item, so others cannot edit it. And this icon's going to stay here until you check it back in. So it's a reminder that, hey, you got this checked out, finish what you're doing, put it back so other folks can make their edits when they have to. Okay? All right, so that's great. So let me go in here and let me look at my document. This is fairly straightforward, extremely easy. And I'm going to want to make some changes here. Now, before we do that, I want to do some other things. I want to show you what another user sees if someone else has checked out this document. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to log myself out here. And I'm going to sign in as another user. And I'm going to go to my SharePoint site. And I'm going to go down to my sales contracts library. And I'm going to see my salesman list file over here. Now, if I hover over that, I see right away in the description details that Christina Tedesco has checked out this item. So this tells this person that this is checked out, although they might not see that. What they will see if they actually go in and try to access the document is a tag up here that confirms to them that they are just viewing this document. And if you click on the little arrow button here, if you try to change it to make changes, it gives you an alert right now that says this workbook is currently checked by someone else. You can't make changes until the file is checked back in. So it tells you right away, hey, you know what? You just can't do what you want to do right now. You can just read it, do what you can. If you need to edit, close this and come back when you edit. Okay? So this shows you that when the file is checked out, no one else can make any changes. If I try to type anything, I can't do this. If I click on this, I get the same message. So I am held in read mode until I go back in here and access the document when someone else has checked it back in. Okay? All right, so let me log back in as myself. With this super fast Microsoft authentication process. Okay, and let's go back into our site. And I logged in as the wrong person, so I need to go back in as myself. Okay, so now I'm in as myself, and I can see here, I'm still getting this reminder that I have this checked out. I have this checked out. Let's just say I finished my changes. I'll actually go in here and do something, so that's worthwhile. Let's say I wanted to add Tony on here, my little fictitious user here, Tony. Whoa. Gee, what a coincidence. His name is almost like mine. I wonder how that happened. And let's say this is his email, and this is his phone number. Okay, so I'm done. This is all that I wanted to do on here. I'm going to close that, and I'm going to now check this back in. Now, you can also see here I have some other options, right? I can see here how many views has been gone on over here. It kind of gives you a little grid for, you know, whatever that's worth. It is what it is. And I can also share this with someone else if I want to. I can see additional details on the document. Tells you some basic information here. When it was modified last, size, things like that. And I also have the ability to discard this checkout. So if I click this, right, and I say, you know what, never mind, you know, I don't want to make these changes. It tells you basically, hey, you're going to lose what you just did. Are you sure you want to do that? You're going to say yes or no. If you say yes, it would delete it. If it said no, then obviously you get back to where you are to check this in. So you definitely want to check it in. You don't want to leave it checked out. You want to put in a comment in here in the history. You're going to be able to see why a change was made. It's helpful for other people who are looking at documents that you've edited. So I'm going to say, you know, added in Tony to list. All right. And I'm going to check this back in. Looks great. My little icon's gone. I'm all checked in now. For kicks and giggles, let's just look at version history. Look at this. Here it is. Here's my latest version. It's number 5. This happened today, and here's my little comment. Here's what I did. I added Tony to the list. Okay, great. So now I have a new checked-in document. I know what I did. I know who did it, and it's accessible in version history. So what did we talk about here? We talked about checking in and checking out documents, how to preserve a document while you're making an edit to make sure those are complete before anyone else has any chances to make any other edits, how to check that document back in, and if another user tries to access a file that you are editing, We've confirmed that they only have view permissions. They can read the file, but they can't edit it until you're done with your work. All right. I hope you found this useful. Thank you very much for joining me in this lesson. In the next lesson, we'll talk about the content approval process and how that works. So we'll take versioning, checking in and checking out, actually one step further to get approvals on content changes and documents. All right. Thanks very much, and I'll see you there. Hey everyone. In this chapter, we're going to talk about content approvals. So we referenced this a little bit when we were looking at versioning, if you remember. We're going to go back into where we did our version settings, and we're going to turn on content approvals for documents. I'm going to show you how that process works. Now, basically what that means is what you can do is you can set SharePoint to require an approval for new documents that are added to a document library. Now, that can be really useful if you have sensitive information or the type of information that really needs to be approved before the rest of your general audience is able to see it and view it, right? And even make changes to it. So what you can do is enable an option to have someone go in there, look at the document, and physically approve it before it's available and readable to the rest of your user base. And we're going to walk through how to set that up, create a document, set up the approval process. I'm going to show you what's going to happen to a user who is just looking for a document that hasn't been approved yet. And you're going to see exactly who can see what when to ensure that the approval process is complete. Okay. All right. So we're in our team site here. I'm in my sales contracts library. And first things first, let's turn on content approval for this library. Okay. So I'm going to go back to where we were before, over up here in library settings. And I'm going to go right back into where I was before in versioning settings. And I'm going to turn on content approval. It's the very first option up here up top. It's going to ask me if I want to require content approval for submitted items. And I'm going to say yes. Okay. Now, if you notice what happened when I clicked yes, that enabled the draft item security section down here towards the bottom. So now I have the option to make these changes. Now, by default, it sets it to only users who can approve items and the author of the item can see documents in here that haven't been approved. So let me explain that a little bit more. When you enable approvals, you basically have three statuses for a document. You've got rejected, pending, and approved. When a user creates a document that hasn't been approved yet, it's automatically in pending status. Once the approver approves that document, that status gets updated to approves. Now, the user can also reject the document, which means it was not approved, and it would have to go back to the author to create more changes. So they have the option of either approving it, rejecting it. Before the approver does anything, the document will remain in pending status. Whew, okay, that was a mouthful. All right, but you guys get the gist. And we'll walk through all these options so you can see how it looks. So basically what you're saying here is, who can see a document that has not been approved? Now, generally, you want to restrict this access, right? Because if you're requiring approval for a document, that means that it's sensitive information that you want to actually confirm is accurate before you let your user base see it. So for the most part, you're probably going to select this item, which is selected by default. But if that's not the case in your organization, you can also select users who can edit items can see drafts also, or any user who can read items can see these drafts as well. Okay, so you do have the option to pick your preference there. I'm going to keep this as only users who can approve items to see drafts so that I can show you what a user who did not create the document that has not been approved sees when they go into the library. All right. Okay. So I'm good to go here. I've required content approval for my submitted items, and I'm making sure that only the people who are in the library can see the items after I've approved them. Okay. So I like that. So I'm going to say, okay, here. Get back to my settings, go back to my library. Now let's create a new document. So some certain things happened here once I enabled that option. You're going to see here now I have another column. It's called approval status. And this is where I can see now what the status is of every document. Now, once you turn on content approvals, if you already have stuff in your library, everything that's in there is automatically marked as approved. Okay, SharePoint assumes you put it in there, it's right, it's going to say it's approved, it's good to go. All right, so let's make something new. So I'm going to go up in here to new. I'm going to say Word document, and it's just a test. So we're just going to put in, just a obligatory word on here to have something in the document. And I think I want to update this name. So let me change this to content approval test, just so I can remember what I'm looking at here. And that's really all that I need to do for the purpose of this exercise. So that's good. I did my document. I'm going to close it. And I'm back in my library. And we're going to give it a second to refresh. And there, now I see my new document. All right, so let's check it out. Document name was created a few seconds ago. I'm the one who created it, and it has a status of pending. Okay, so now let's see what another user sees in this library with this document not being approved yet. So I'm going to log out. And I'm going to log in as another user. And I'm going to go to my site. Find my library. And I can see here, Tony cannot see that new document that we created because it is not approved. Now he sees all the stuff here because this has already been approved, and he sees the new column. Everyone's going to see this, but he cannot see anything that has not been approved yet. Okay? Okay. So now let's approve this document so Tony can see and he can find what he's looking for. So to do that, I have to be the actual approver. So let's sign out as Tony. And let's sign back in as the creator. And let's go back to my site and into my library. Okay, here's my pending document. I can see it because I'm the one who actually has to approve it. So I want to go through that process now and approve this. Now, up here on the top, you're going to see your access bar for your library. Again, in the 3 action items over there on the right, you're going to see additional options. So you have Automate, Alert Me, and Manage My Alerts. If you go into Power Apps, you can see all apps, you can customize forms. And you have a few other default options up here as well. Now, once you select the document, so you have to select it, it tells you you have one selected, and you can also see some additional items pop up here in the action bar. You're going to click on the 3 ellipse button, and you're going to find here where you can say approve or reject. So this is where you can approve the document or you can reject the document. You're going to click in here. It's going to give you the options that you can select for what you want to do. I want to approve this. I'm okay with this document. And I'm going to put a comment, again, to just manage my version history. Let's just say doc approved. Just to have something in the history. I'm going to say okay. And now it's approved. Now guess what? I'm going to go back at his Tony, and guess what he's going to see? He's going to see that new document. Now, just for kicks and giggles, let's go do that. Make sure Tony has what he needs, and then we'll be good to go. Okay, so I'm back in SharePoint. I'm going to find my site. I'm going to go to my library. Boom, there it is. Content approval test. It's approved. Good to go. Tony has what he needs, and he found the information he was looking for. Okay, so in this lesson, we talked about content approvals. We showed how to enable those in for a library. We created a new document. We walked through the approval process. We saw what the author and the approver sees as opposed to a regular viewer who's just looking for information. And we learned how to add content approval to our library workflows. Now, next up, we're going to look at deleted documents. So if someone deleted a document, what really happens to it? Is it really deleted? Is it recoverable? Let's find out. I'll see you in the next lesson. Okay, in this lesson, we're going to talk about deleted items, okay? So in SharePoint, there are many people in here, like that are looking at information, editing information, and doing all sorts of things. Now, more than one user, more than likely, has access to delete content from a list and from a library. And you want to enable some users to have those privileges to make sure they can manage their information effectively. So, like things happen in real life, and sometimes someone deletes things that maybe should not have been deleted. That's okay. There is a way to recover something that may have been deleted from a list or library. I'm going to show you how SharePoint does that, okay? So let's do that. Let's take this content approval test document that we created in our last lesson, and let's just delete it. We don't need it, right? We did what we had to do. You know what? I'm done with this. Let's just get it out of my library. It's just taking up space here. Delete, pretty easy to find right up here in the action bar. Let's delete this item. It's going to just ask me to make sure that I'm sure I want to delete this item. I'm going to say, yeah, you know what? I'm good to go. I'm going to delete it. Great. Okay. Okay. So I deleted my item. I did what I wanted to do. I'm going about my business. Well, guess what? Tony drops me an email and he says, hey, Christina, where is that content list, that content test document? I need it. I want to go back in there and do something. Uh-oh, I just deleted it. What are we going to do? It's okay. All is not lost. We can recover that document. All you want to do is go right back up into your settings icon, and you're going to go into Site Contents. Now, from Site Contents, you're going to see in the right-hand side, you have a recycle bin. If you're a Windows user, you are more than likely familiar with the recycle bin from your File Explorer. This is the same concept, but it's a different recycle bin than what's in your Windows Explorer. So you're not going to find this document in your Windows Explorer recycle bin. It is going to be in your SharePoint recycle bin. We're going to click on that. I can see from it, I have something in here. It tells me what's deleted. All right, well, actually, it was Tony in here who deleted it because I'm still logged in as him, but that's okay. It was created by myself. It says what the original location was and the name of the document. So I got two options here. I can check on this and I can delete and empty the recycle bin, or I can restore it, which is what I want to do, right? So let's do that. Let's bring this back into the library. It tells me I'm restoring one item. It's out of the recycle bin. Let's go back into our library. Boom, there it is. All is put back. Everything's okay. Panics have subsided, everyone has what they need, and you're able to move forward. All right? So fortunately, there is an option to recover a document once it's in the recycle bin. If you delete that item from the recycle bin, recovering it is not that easy. If at all possible, you would have to contact your IT admin and see if there is any way they can recover that information from any of the other tools that they have behind the scenes. All right. So I hope this helped a little bit on showing you how to recover some deleted options. In the next lesson, we're going to talk about alerts so that you can actually keep yourself up to date on users' activities in a library, okay? So if you want to know when something happened, like maybe Tony wanted to know when I deleted that document, he will get an alert. He can get an alert to say, hey, so-and-so did this in this library. Go check it out. It may have affected you, okay? So thanks very much for joining me in this lesson, and I'll see you in the next one. Okay, now in this lesson, we're going to talk about alerts, all right? So since I had this last snafu with Tony in this content approval test document, I really want to know now when anything changes in this library and specifically to that document. So I want to create an alert or notification so that I get told or known when someone makes any changes to this library at all. Okay, so let's talk about that. So here's what we can do. If you're in your library and you want to know when anything's going on, you can enable alerts either for the assets in the library, the folders in the library, or the actual library itself, okay? So all these options you have noticed are pretty much in the same spot, right? So it's pretty easy to navigate around SharePoint. They're in the 3 action items in the default menu for what you're looking for. That's really where you're going to be able to find most of what you're looking for. And you see the option is called Alert Me, and it's the same option whether you're adding an alert to a library, you're adding an alert to a folder, or you're adding an alert to an asset, okay? So you can pick any level that you want to get an alert from, because you might not be interested in it and everything in the library or everything in the folder. You're just worried about one document, right? It's just your document. That's all you care about. That's fine. You can enable it at the document level. But if you are the owner of the site or you're responsible for the library's content, clearly you might want to make sure you get all the information for anyone who does anything in that library and making sure that you get notified for it. So I'm going to pick that, okay? So I'm going to go up here to my library and I'm going to click the Alert Me option and I'm going to set up an alert for myself so that I am notified when anything changes. So here's what we got to do. We just got to tell SharePoint what kind of alert I want, where it has to go, and how frequently I want that information, all right? Now, you want to think this through a little bit, because if you're the content manager, say, for a library, which is a common role in SharePoint, and you enable yourself to get an alert for all changes right away, your email is going to go nuts, right? Especially if you have a large organization, you're going to end up ignoring those emails because we know how that goes, and it's not going to be a valuable notification process. So think it through. How important is this information? Maybe for the library, you just want a summarized version once a month or once a week, but for 1 or 2 specific documents in there, you want a detailed notification every day. You can set those options in both of those places for the library to make sure you're getting the right notification level that you need, okay? So let's look at this in a little more detail. You have your title, that's fine. Contacts, this is myself. Yep, that's good. Now you can also CC other people. Maybe you work with other approvers or other content managers. You want them to make sure they know when things change at all. You can add those email addresses in here for any user who currently has access to the site, okay? It's going to give you the delivery method. All right, I'm okay with email, which is my email address. I can also get a text message if you want. You can pick either or of those options. Now, what kind of change do you want to know about? All right, do you want to know about all changes, just when things are added, just when things are modified, just when things are deleted? You can specify that here if you care only when particular actions happen. How often do you want to see these changes? I want an alert when anything changes. Or maybe I just want to see something when someone else changes a document. Maybe I just want to see something when someone else changes a document created by me, or when someone changes a document modified by me, okay? So you have a few options there as well. And then you also can let SharePoint know, again, when do you want them to send the alerts. If you want to see everything right away, you'll get the email immediately. If you only want a daily summary, you'll get a summary notification email once a day. Weekly summary will come out once a week, all right? I'm going to select my defaults. I like this. I like the email. I want to see everything. I want to see it when anything changes. I want to see everything right away, okay? I'm really stressing over this document that Tony freaked out on, okay? So this is good. I'm going to say okay on there. Now what's going to happen is I'm going to get an email that I'm going to show you guys in a second to notify me that I have a new alert created for my communications team site. And here's what's going to happen when information comes in. All right, so that email just came in. So let me open this up and share this with you. So here's what I got. I got an email in my box that says, I have successfully created an alert for sales contracts. Here's the site that it got added to. And it tells me I'm going to receive an alert according to the delivery method, which I know is everything right away. Now, if down the line you want to change this or get rid of this alert, right in here in the email, you can click on this link and you're going to get into the Manage Alerts page. And you're going to see right here, you can either add an alert here from this page, or if you don't want this anymore, you can delete this, or you can click in it and you can modify it, okay? So there's a lot of changes that you can do to an existing alert right from the email that you get once you create the alert for yourself, okay? All right, so this is good. And now I'm going to get an alert when anything changes. Let's change something and see what happens. Just to confirm, I'm going to get what I need to see, all right? So here I am in my content. So I pretty much said I'm going to get a notification when anything happens, right? Okay, so let's make something happen. I'm going to create a new document real quick. And again, we don't need anything specific in here. We're just creating an action. Give it a second to refresh. All right, there's my new document. Now what should happen is I should get an email that says, hey, someone created a new document in this library. You might want to go check it out and see what's going on. And lo and behold, there it is. Immediately, I got this email. It says someone created this document in here, has been changed. That approval status is still going on in here, so I still have to go through that approval process. But I know right away something happened. There was a change in the library and something has been altered that I might want to go look at. This is extremely helpful, obviously, if you are an approver, okay? So then you're going to email right away, say, hey, there's something you got to do to approve, which can also be set in workflows, and we'll talk about that in future lessons as well. But alert is a really easy way to always be notified on any kind of information that you want in any kind of area that you may manage content in or just frequent for viewing for specific reasons. Now, like I said before, even though you have an alert set up here in the library, maybe someone else or you might want to know something more specific about this document that was created. So you can, again, go in here and create a different kind of alert with different settings that maybe you just want to see in a different frequency and enable that for a specific asset as well. All right. So you have a lot of options here in alerts. There's a lot you can do to make sure you're up to speed on what's going on in your SharePoint site or a site that you access frequently. So we learned how to do that at both the library level and the specific asset level. We saw the type of information that came in when you do enable alerts and what you can do once you get that information. We showed you how to modify an alert once you've created it so that you can alter the settings at any time. And we showed you that you can just have more than one alert for the same content area. Okay, so you can have a different type of alert with a different frequency for assets than you do for the entire library itself. All right, I hope you found this useful. Thank you very much for attending this lesson, and I will see you in the next one. Hey everyone, welcome back to SharePoint Fundamentals. All right, in this chapter, we're going to talk about searching in SharePoint. Now, searching is actually a pretty big deal in SharePoint. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. Fortunately for you as a user, it's really easy to find the search bar, number one, and understand where you're navigating to and get the results that you're looking for. Now, that being said, there are a lot of customizations that can happen to a search engine behind the scenes in SharePoint. So to talk a little bit about what happens in the administrative aspect, to give you a better understanding on how search results are generated, let's just start there for a few minutes so that you can understand where it comes from and how searching has evolved in SharePoint. So there's actually two search experiences in SharePoint. One is called the classic search experience and one is the modern search experience. We're using modern sites. We're working in Office 365 with modern templates. So the experience that we're using here is the modern or Microsoft search. Now, where the search bar is placed is different in modern sites versus the classic sites. It's more off to the side on the classic experience as opposed to it being more visible here in the modern experience. And the way your results come back is different also. The Microsoft or modern experience is personal. So the user's one result sees may be different than what from another user sees, even though they put in the same keywords. And the reason for that is because the insights have been optimized in the modern experience to be more personal to the user who's using the site to make sure they see their more relevant content first, as opposed to another user who may not be searching in the same areas of the sites or the site collections. Now, behind the scenes, both search experiences actually use the same search index to find the search results. So one experience won't limit any results as opposed to another experience. The scope is the same. And Microsoft actually has search admin roles that are defined where a member of the organization can be specifically responsible for customizing and tailoring the searches for your organization to make sure everybody sees only the relevant content that they're looking for. Now, one more thing to note is that both search experiences by default are turned on, and you cannot turn either one of them off. So you always have the most optimized results between both of the engines, regardless of which one you're using for, whether you're using modern or classic. Now that being said, let's look and see how we search in SharePoint as a user. So here I am on my SharePoint homepage, and you see here right up top, pretty simple, here's my search bar, right? Now if you're looking here, it says in here, search in SharePoint. So I'm at the very top level. So whatever I put in here is going to search all of the relevant content that I have in SharePoint. So that means across all my sites, all my pages, all my assets, to find what I'm looking for. So let's just type in something very generic that we know we're going to find and look at the results that we get. So I'm just going to start over here with some of the sites that I see here on my following navigation bar to see what kind of content I get when I type in one of these options to search from. So I'm going to use Team STECT. All right, now let's just look at the results. All right, so here's your results page, and you see here you have some categories that you can filter results on. I'm going to stay on the all category here so that you can see everything that came back. And I got a couple of results here, and the little icons here show me what it is. So team, this is my site. Okay, yep, I know I have a team site. We saw that right on the home SharePoint page. In that site, I have a notebook. So I have a Team STE notebook that's always created in every SharePoint site. I've got some folders here. I've got some shared documents because I have a library in this site, right? And it's related to the CT team library. Yep, we know that. And then there's some wiki data. So that's just mainly the data that's in the team site that you create. It's one of the things that happens by default. It talks about some forms that I have in the team site and my site pages. So this covers really all of the site contents in the Team STE site. If we go to site contents and Team STE site, we'll see these options here. I'm at the very top level in my SharePoint search. So that's what all these options came back. All right. So now let's actually go into that site and let's search again and let's see what happens. You've probably guessed it, but what happens is we're going to drill down now as we get farther into our SharePoint, depending on where we're starting from. So if you look up here up top now, I'm in the same navigation bar, but it says search this site as opposed to searching in SharePoint. So now I'm already in the Team STECT site, right? Now if I just type that same set of characters or those words or that word in here, I'm going to get different results because I'm starting farther down. So you see my results are filtered, right? I'm already in the site, so I don't see all that information that comes outside of the site that I'm in. I get the assets that are in this site. So I get the notebook, I get the forms assets, and I get the site pages, okay? So let's take this one step farther. So if I'm actually in the site again, and I'm actually in a specific area in the site, let's go into our documents library. If you look up top in the search bar again, you're going to see it changed, right? It has on here now, search this library. And if I did that same word again, and I searched, I don't get anything back because there was nothing with those characters or that keyword in this document library that I'm in, okay? All right, so trying to keep this simple. As a user, when you're searching in a modern site, it's very easy to see and understand where you're coming from. The search criteria or the search scope will follow you as you get into your site collections and your sites. And then it will also expand your search as you bring yourself back up to the top level page in your organization. Okay, so in this lesson, we covered searching in SharePoint. We talked about how the search bar will change depending on where we are. We talked behind the scenes on kind of what happens and how that content can be customized, or those search results really can be customized behind the scenes. If you're interested in learning about that, you should be able to find a lot of information in the Microsoft Docs page. I recommend you contact your IT administrator. I'm sure they could give you some insight to help you understand more on how the search results are generated and get a better understanding on how it happens, but behind the scenes in SharePoint as opposed to being a user on the front end. All right, hope you found this useful. Thank you very much for taking this lesson, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey everyone, welcome back. Okay, so in the last lesson we talked about searching, so now we know how to get to where we need to be and what we're looking for. Now let's talk about doing a little more once you find your relevant content or once you're on the section that you want to be in to get more specific information in that area. So for example, your libraries. You're going to be searching in libraries frequently to find the information that you're looking for. That's really what SharePoint is about. It holds assets, it holds information for your organization, right? So let's start with the document library that we created for sales contracts and learn how to make this more usable to find information to make it easier on you when you're looking for something. Now, in our example here, we don't have a lot of information, right? So it's pretty easy to find what we're looking for. We've got 2 folders, we've got 3 documents. I don't really need to sort or search or filter or group or anything like that. But in the real world, especially if you have a large company, this library is going to be quite expansive. It's going to be huge. You're going to have maybe hundreds of documents, many folders, and it may not be easy to find what you need right away, okay? And accessing information quickly is obviously very important. So there's a few things that you can do in your list or in your library to find things very quickly to make it easier for you. So if you're in your library, you're looking here, over here on the right-hand side, you see right away you have a filters pane that you can activate and find some relevant content very easily by selecting some easy options here to get rid of what you don't need to see. So let's just walk and talk through these. So first of all, you're going to see how many items are in your current list that you're seeing. So if you haven't filtered anything and you haven't, sorted on anything or constrained your results any other way, you're going to see the total number of items that are in this library. This library's got 5 items, and that's true. I see that I have 2 folders and I have 3 documents, right? Now, it's modified since 2021, so it's for the whole year, okay? And you can use this little search bar to change this to be a shorter time frame to filter out the content as it gets closer to the day that you're searching in. Now, we changed our information here just a few days ago, so I'm not seeing any results while I'm doing this. But if I just go one more notch over, since yesterday, everything went away because that's a time frame, and you see here my filtered items changed to 0, okay? So the filtered items that you see is going to be relevant to the level of filtering that you're on when you're using this filter panel. All right, you can also put a specific date in here if that's easier for you. And then going down through our other options, there's document types that we can search on. So if I just want to see my Word document, see my filters item changed up there also, I now just see my Word documents. Clearly, you know what's going to happen. I click on Excel, I'm going to see the same thing, okay? If I used other, I'm just going to see my folders in there. Now, if you have that approval status activated, that's an option that you can filter on as well. And you see right here, you can say, I just want to see approved documents, or maybe you're someone who needs to do approvals and you got that notification and you came back in here and you need to do what you need to do, but there's hundreds of documents that are in your way. Where's your thing? Very easy. Just click on pending. You'll see work that's waiting for you so you can take your actions, do what you have to, and leave quickly. All right. Okay, so that's filtering. That's one way to see content more specifically, depending on what you're looking for. While we're here, let's cover sorting and let's cover grouping also, okay? So if you see here when you're looking at your columns, there's these little drop downs here that are next to the column headers. If you click on those, you have a couple of options, all right? You can also filter by from the column also, so that gives you a more detailed filter result than using the whole panel. You can also sort, okay? So basic sort, you can go A to Z, Z to A. Depending on what the column is, it's going to change your level to be alphabetical order like that. You can see how the list of options may change depending on the type of column that you're looking to take an action on. So if I'm in the approval state column, I see A to Z, Z to A, filter by, group by, column settings, and then some totals. This could be some totaling that you can do to count items in your libraries or lists. We'll talk about that in a later lesson. And if you're on a different type of column, though, you might see something different. Like this just says older to newer, newer to older, filter by, group by, modified. They're generally the same, but you're going to see some minor differences depending on the column type that you're looking on, just FYI, okay? You can see here the name just has a couple of options because it's not detailed content. So there's not really a lot that we can do here, but there still is some, all right? So that's another way that you can do that. You can sort information relevant to a variety of ways depending on the columns you have set up in your list or your library. Last but not least, you can also group by information in here. So let's say, for example, you have, again, a large amount of documents, a large amount of assets in your library. To make it easier, you can group by the specific column so you can organize your content better. So let's do that just in approval status. So if I just say group by approval status, it kind of looks a little bit better, right? And you can collapse these so that when users come in, you'll start at the group level and then you can expand it to see what the details are underneath there. It definitely cleans it up. It gives you more information out of the bat so you know how many of these assets that you have in this group, and it really helps keep your content organized at a more optimal level. All right. Okay, so I hope you found this useful. We went through a couple of things in this chapter. We focused in our document library and we talked about how to filter, how to sort, and how to group items in your library. You can also do this in a list. We'll be covering lists in future chapters, but you will see those same options there as well. So I hope you enjoyed this chapter. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one. Welcome back, everyone. All right, in this lesson, let's look a little bit more into our library and optimize this content and expand this content a little bit more. So we talked about adding things and sorting and filtering and making the columns and the information that's in here by default look how we want it to look. But let's talk about getting some more information in here and kind of enhancing the view, okay? So I'm in right now still our sales contracts library, and I'm in a view that holds all the documents. And you know that by going up here over on the right-hand side, there's a drop down here that shows you what view you're in. Now, by default, SharePoint gives you a few views out of the box. The first one is the All Documents view that you always see by default. Since we have approvals turned on for this site, you have a view for the approved and rejected items that shows you a different structure for the information that's in there. And you can see over here, you have a few columns added. I have that approval column added in here because I'm looking specifically for the approved information in my assets. I also have something called My Submissions. So everything that I've submitted to this library, I have a filtered view on that by default from SharePoint to show only content that I've put in here and not assets that other people have updated or uploaded. Now, these view options may be okay for you, and maybe they're not. I mean, there's not a lot of columns here, right? All I have is the name, when it was modified, who modified it, and the approval status. Now, behind the scenes, in the architecture behind the pages in SharePoint, there's a lot more information. There's a lot more columns by default. And even if you wanted to, you could add more columns to that table behind the scenes to put in your own custom content. So let's start there. Let's create our own column to hold some more data on this library so that we can get some more specific information. So all you're going to do is click the Add Column option from your library. There's actually a few ways that you can do this. First, I'm going to show you the Add Column option from the library, and then you can pick the kind of column that you want to add. So you have a lot of options here. So it can be a text, a single line of text, a multiple line of text, a location, a number. It can be a yes, no pick list. It can be a person. So this would tie back to the users in the SharePoint site or collection, a specific date and time, a choice, a hyperlink. So you have a lot of data types here that you can choose from, okay? And you can customize your table for your library right here while you're viewing your information. So let's just add in a single line of text, okay? Let's keep this simple. And we're just going to call this notes, right? So I'm just going to let my users come in here and put in just a little bit of notes. I don't want, multiple lines and have it be a whole lot of information. Just some high-level summary notes for what it is that's in there to give you some more relevant content. So we're just going to say high-level summary of info. All right, we'll just use that for example. We don't need a default value. We don't need a calculated value. Here's some more advanced customized options that you can do. You can also here specify the number of characters for a limitation. I'm okay with 255, but if you wanted to make that, field smaller, you could definitely do that. Just to kind of make sure that you really streamline the content that your users are putting in there, okay? You can make this a required column if you wanted to. So if someone put in new information, they would have to populate the values in here. If you could do that, you could also make sure that there's unique values, and you can, by default, it's going to be added to all content types. Just leave that as a yes. We'll talk about content types in a future lesson, but for right now, just for the purposes of adding this column in, we're just going to keep it by default. We can also add in some formulas for some advanced options to do some validation if it was a type of column that would require something like that, okay? All right, so we're going to keep it simple. We're just adding in a notes, just this high-level summary info, 255 characters. That's cool. All right, it was created. That's great. I'm good to go. I got my notice here, and I have my new column here that I can see, right? Okay, so now that we have our notes column, we can populate values in there and add some more information to our content. So let's just do that for our content approval test document that we created before, right? So if you right click on the little action items menu here and you go into details, you'll see additional information about your library columns. And I'm going to go down here to notes. I'm going to add in new doc for testing in my notes field here in the details panel. I click out, it's automatically saved, and you can see that populate right there in the column to give you some more information about your asset in the library. Now, let's say you realize that you don't want everyone to see this notes field. This is really just for you. You're using it for yourself to put in some more personal information or some more specific information that's only relevant to you. But you have this in the all documents default view here, and everybody can see it. So you don't want to do that. So here's a couple of things that we can do. Number one, we can hide columns in here so that we specify who can see what columns in this all documents default view. And we can also create a personal view for ourselves so that we can see this extra information while making sure it doesn't clutter anyone else's library if the content isn't relevant to them. So let's do that first. Let's save this view as a personal view that only I can see because it's only relevant to me. So I'm just going to call this CT view. And it says right here, you have the option of making this a public view, which if you did, everyone else could see it. And that could be a relevant option as well. Maybe you just want to make sure some people have this and, can go there and not everyone has to. Or you can make it a private view. If I deselected this, then only I'd be able to see the specific view. No one else would. They would not have it when they went into their drop down here and looked at all the views that are available for them. So now that I have the information that I need in my view, I want to make sure that I take this notes column out of the all documents view because it's not relative to everybody. So what I can do here is, even though I've created this column and it's relevant to me, in this default view, I can just go in here underneath column settings in that column and select to show or hide this column. I'm going to get an edit view columns panel up here on the right hand side. And actually what this shows you is all of the columns that are currently available for this library. So there's a lot of default information that's behind the scenes. You can select any one of these columns to be visible if you want to modify any view that you currently have. And here's where you can also take away columns that you've added here in the library that you don't want everyone to see in this default view. Once you've made your changes, you're going to click apply. There it is. It's right back to normal, and you've saved your view in its original form. Now, one more thing to note. Another way where you can modify view content is in the library settings. So remember this gear up here over here on the right-hand side? If you select that and then go into the specific library settings from there, you'll see these same options where you can see your columns, modify your views, create a column, and create new views, a little more organized and a little bit more of an administrative format in addition to other administrative settings than if you did it in the library itself. Either option will get you the information that we just walked through and will update your view for your resources. It's just simply a matter of what's the easiest path for you to get to where you need to be. Okay? Okay, so let's recap. What did we talk about? We talked about views, having an all documents default view. We talked about creating a custom view for yourself and adding columns to views and making sure only the right view has the column that you've added. We showed how to add or remove columns from a view, and we showed how to get into view settings from library settings from the topmost settings icon in SharePoint. All right? Okay, so I hope you found this useful. Thank you very much for joining me in this lesson, and I'll see you in the next one. That concludes our program. Thank you very much for taking this course with us. You learned a lot here. We hope you enjoyed this course here at Learnit. Thank you very much for taking it with us, and have a great day.